about racism, anti-blackness, or violence.
Racism is bad and I stand against it.
I will use my voice in the most uplifting way possible.
I will use my white privilege to lift people up as high as possible.
And do everything in my power to educate my community.
And use my white power to educate my community.
I will love my black neighbors the same as my white ones.
I will make love to my black neighbors and my white...
I really didn't want to make this video. I tried so hard to stay away from all this. I am fully aware that uploading a video such as this one will most likely hurt my image and turn people away, but at this point I just don't care anymore. There are some things that I feel should be addressed. People are so quick to pledge their support for a movement built upon lies. People no longer care about the facts. They rather fall in line and follow orders like the cowardly sheep they are. There's not too many free thinkers in today's world. Not only do people fail to acknowledge the facts, but they will actually reject them. When you present some individuals with indisputable facts, they will immediately toss them out if they do not align with the narrative they are trying to push. Let me be real clear. Despite the ignorance of some people, analyzing facts and data are both extremely important when forming an opinion on a particular matter. Unless you have been living under a rock, you should be aware what has been going on in America these last several days. The death of George Floyd by the hands of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin had sparked outrage among many across the country. Since then, there have been protests in every state in America where people claim to be fighting to bring justice to George Floyd and his family. But it's also much bigger than that. People are standing up against police brutality and systemic racism. But only when a white cop kills a black man or woman. You see, this is where the hypocrisy starts. People express outrage and demand justice when an African American is killed by a white police officer, but many choose to remain blind when police kill a white man or woman. They make sure to stay silent when black people kill other black people. They stay silent when a black person takes the life of a white person. All lives matter? Nah, fuck that. Black Lives Matter is the name of the movement because they are the ones who are being targeted and killed at record rates by the hands of police officers, right? Blacks are being killed disproportionately by cops, right? Being black is a death sentence, as Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey had claimed, right? There is a legalized genocide against people of color going on in America, as Benjamin Crump, the attorney for George Floyd's family, said, right? Black lives are under threat every day, as Joe Biden says, right? Wrong. The data does not back up any of these claims. If people would get their head out of their ass and stop this mob mentality, virtue signaling, hey, look at me, I'm such a good person bullshit, and actually took the time to evaluate the data, then they would see that a lot of this is misinformation being spread around. Many people are being brainwashed and fighting these systemic injustices that simply do not exist. Does racism exist? Yes. Is justice always served? No, but every race has to deal with racism and injustices. When I was a kid, I went to school which consisted predominantly of African American students. There were plenty of times when I was excluded from a group or activity because I didn't have the same color skin as them. I'm not trying to compare this incident where I was a victim of racism in elementary school to a person losing their life due to a racist police officer, and I understand this is anecdotal evidence, but it is worth mentioning. And let's talk about racist police officers for a moment. So often, including the George Floyd incident, cops are accused of being racist, and in many cases, this is nothing more than a completely ignorant assumption. It's the same thing when people are accused of being a white supremacist. People just throw that term around so loosely. To some people, if you disagree with their views, you are a white supremacist. If you preach all lives matter, you're a white supremacist. If you're black and condemn the Black Lives Matter movement, you are a white supremacist. It's nothing more than an assumption with no substantiating evidence to back it up. Was Derek Chauvin, the man who used excessive force which led to the death of George Floyd, racist? Well, we simply do not know. Was the use of excessive force with his knee on the neck of George Floyd for 8 minutes and 46 seconds racially motivated? Did Chauvin wake up that day with the intention of taking a black man's life? These are the questions that may never be answered with real evidence to back it up. Honestly, I don't believe Derek Chauvin woke up that day with the intention of killing a man. The knee on the neck for over 8 minutes was definitely excessive force, but does not prove there was an intent to murder this man. It does not prove this officer was racist. And what if this had happened to a white man? Huh? If George Floyd had been white, would we be seeing the same outrage sparked across the nation? Probably not. In fact, I'm damn near positive we wouldn't. You most likely wouldn't have even known it happened. We all know the name George Floyd, Mike Brown, Freddie Gray, Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor. But what about Tony Timpa. Tony Timpa was a 32-year-old white male who died in August of 2016 after having called 911 asking for assistance. How many have heard this man's name circulate through the country? I'm willing to bet not many of you. Where were his protests? Where were his hashtags? Where was his demand for justice to be served? This story did not get covered nearly as much as the George Floyd story and many others did. Not much attention directed towards this incident at all. Well, why is that? Could it have been because this man was white? Which does not fit the narrative of cops killing black people disproportionately, even though the data says otherwise, which we will talk more about shortly. If you watch this incident unfold through the footage of one of the officer's body cams, you will most likely be appalled by what you see. Multiple police officers standing above Tony Timpa's lifeless body as the cops crack jokes and laugh about the situation. But again, white man killed by white cop doesn't support the narrative that so many are trying to push. I am not suggesting that Tony Timpa or any white man or woman's life is more valuable and precious than that of African Americans who have fallen victim to police brutality. But I do believe that how people react to these tragedies should not be determined by the skin color of those involved. I see so much hypocrisy within this Black Lives Matter movement. If you say all lives matter, you will be condemned by many Black Lives Matter supporters. If you show support for police officers, you will be criticized by the very same people who advocate peace and equality for all. So who's really the racist ones? Who's really dividing the people based on their beliefs and color of their skin? I mean, me personally, I support police officers. I don't believe the lives of one race matter more than the other. I'm not racist at all. And yet, because of my beliefs and the data I refer to, which anyone with internet has access to, I will be labeled a piece of shit racist. It's so hypocritical. Why can't this movement be an all-inclusive fight against police brutality and racism? Not just for black people, but for everyone of all races. I feel the movement would have way more supporters if that were the case. But nah, can't have that. That wouldn't work because there's always got to be something to divide us. And in this case, it's race. Now, many Black Lives Matter supporters will claim that the focus of this movement is on African Americans because they are victims of systemic racism and are being targeted and killed by police officers disproportionately. Well, first off, this systemic racism they speak of is a lie. The system itself is not holding people back of a particular race. Are there racist individuals in a position of power? Sure, but that is just racism, and people of all races fall victim to it. The system is not preventing a person of a particular race from achieving their goals. We all share the same human rights and freedoms. Now, when it comes to this idea that there is a racial bias in deaths by the hands of police officers, that idea falls flat on its face because there is no substantiating evidence to back it up. In fact, the data contradicts these beliefs. According to the data, more white people are killed by cops than African Americans each year. Now, this makes sense considering most of the US population consists of white people. That being said, I think it's worth mentioning that black people make up a low percentage of the population, but a significant percentage of crime in the country. Also, a police officer is more likely to be killed by a black man than an unarmed black man is to be killed by the police. Out of everyone who was shot by an officer last year, most of those people were armed, and there was a higher chance of a black suspect carrying a deadly weapon than a white suspect. Out of the 1,042 people who were shot and killed by police officers last year, less than 2% of those people were unarmed black men. Last year, we saw the least amount of deaths of unarmed black suspects since 2015, possibly even earlier than that. Also, both black on black crime and black on white crime is higher than white on black crime. I mostly use the Washington Post database and FBI.gov to analyze this data, and if you want more precise numbers, you can conduct your own research. There are even more statistics than what I listed, and if you consider everything that the data shows, nothing seems off. Black people are not being targeted by police. It baffles me how the focus of this movement is on African Americans being killed by police, despite all this data that shows greater percentages of black on black and black on white crime than white on black crime, despite more officers dying last year by black men than unarmed black men were killed by police, despite more white people being killed by cops each year than blacks, regardless of the fact that whites make up the majority of the US population. If you feel this data is unreliable, then I would love to know where you get your data and how can you be sure yours is legitimate. And you know, that's another thing I wonder. I question how many people who are protesting and support this movement have actually looked at the statistics. How many even know what they are fighting for? I'm confident that there are many people who have not conducted their own research on this matter, and yet they support this movement just because they are a bunch of obedient followers. They can't think for themselves, they just mindlessly join the mob and do what they're told. Despite all the data and all the facts, this movement has its focus on black people. Actually, no, not even that. The focus is on black men being killed by white cops. Everyone is so broken and disgusted with what happened to George Floyd, which, by the way, I want to make it clear, he definitely did not deserve to die that day. But there is so much disregard for lives that were lost when it's a black man killing a black man, or a black man killing a white man, or a white killing a white. How can people not see the hypocrisy in all this? There are so many double standards. Black lives matter, but only when they die to a white cop. Where was all the media coverage for David Dorn, the retired St. Louis police captain? Where the fuck was his justice? Where the fuck are his protests? A story like that doesn't receive the attention that it should because it doesn't fit the narrative that the media and many others are trying to push. Again, everyone is idolizing a criminal. George Floyd did 5 years in prison for assault and robbery. He was also convicted of theft with a firearm. This man held a gun to a pregnant lady's stomach. That is evil. None of that justifies his recent death, but it's important to remember that this man was not some wonderful person that we should all be worshipping. His death was unjust and disgusting, but he had done evil things, and it's important to shed some light on that. I mean, honestly, when Floyd held a firearm to the stomach of a pregnant lady, that is a time where he deserved to die. That would have been justified if he was shot dead. But again, he didn't deserve to die the way he did recently. I agree. Like, imagine if Derek Chauvin is wrongfully murdered. Will everyone mourn his death? Will people be saying, oh, I know he did some bad things in the past, but he didn't deserve to die that way? Nah, people would celebrate that man's death. Again, so many double standards when it comes to the views of some of these people. A lot of this movement is built on lies and deceit. Now, I can't get through this video without discussing all the virtue signaling sheep on social media. I understand some people have good intentions and are pledging their support for this sham, but many people are so clearly only showing support for this movement to gain those extra brownie points and to show all their followers how righteous they are. These people are using their platform to spread awareness and fight the good fight against racism and police brutality. They will use their white privilege to stand up to these racial injustices and make the world a better place. Ever since the George Floyd incident, everyone thinks they are a civil rights activist all of a sudden. Some people are genuine, and others either give in to the pressure of all their peers supporting the movement, or they just use this opportunity as a way to show how good of a person they are. Some people have never publicly said anything about systemic racism on their platform, but now, because everyone is doing it, they follow suit. Some people make it real fucking clear that they don't actually care and they just gave in to the pressure, because these people were silent the first several days after this incident occurred, but after seeing all their peers show continued support, they just had to hop on board. Now let me be real clear, just because I do not support this movement and the lies it's built upon, that doesn't mean I support the idea of systemic racism and police brutality. No, absolutely not. I condemn both those things. Members of Black Lives Matter have not clearly expressed their specific goals. What exactly is the change they are fighting for? Don't just say we're fighting against systemic racism. That is so fucking vague. If there is a true end goal for Black Lives Matter, it has not yet been properly relayed and explained to the public. I understand this is bigger than George Floyd, but his death is what sparked these protests and riots we've seen over the last week. You hear many demanding justice for Floyd. Well, what exactly needs to happen to satisfy the mob? Derek Chauvin had been charged with third-degree murder after only 3 or 4 days. Then his charges were increased to second-degree murder, and the other 3 officers involved are facing charges now as well. What is the goal? What is the change they are seeking? What needs to be said to stop this madness? What is justice to them? I don't think these riots would cease even if the officers involved were lynched in the street. I don't think a lot of people even know why they are out there. Well, some clearly do, like the rioters. There are pieces of shit out there destroying our cities, burning buildings to the ground, looting stores until they are picked clean. We're talking about millions of dollars in property damage. Oh, but it's fine because it's just property damage, right? No, wrong. Well, first off, this kind of violence and destruction is not justified. This solves nothing. It causes nothing but harm. And second, it's not just property damage. People's livelihoods are being severely affected. Their businesses are undeservingly being burnt to the fucking ground, and that includes black business owners. Several people have been killed and many injured during these senseless riots, including black people. But as we already discussed, Black Lives Matter doesn't care a whole lot about black lives unless the lives were lost to a white cop. Some will argue violence is the only way because when we tried peace, it didn't work. Nothing changed. People love to use Colin Kaepernick as an example of a time when people were upset with a peaceful protest. But they completely missed the point of why people weren't happy with Kaepernick taking a knee. People had a problem with that because the man was using a platform where he was being paid millions to play football. He could have taken his knee somewhere else outside of the NFL and that would have been fine. But you keep hearing, oh, peace didn't work, nothing changed, now violence is the only way. Well, what didn't change? What could have been done that would have prevented George Floyd's death by the hands of Derek Chauvin? If Derek was truly racist and intentionally wanted to take a black man's life that day, what parts of the system could have changed to stop it? You're always going to have bad cops. That's a reality. The system can't stop that. I mean, I'm all for police reform to a certain degree and longer training to become a police officer. I don't have a problem with that at all. But some things can't be prevented, and we can't have people burning down cities and causing all this additional harm when there is an unjust killing. One police officer makes a terrible decision and then the rest of the world has to pay the price. How does that make any logical sense? Let me be real fucking clear. The destruction of cities and violence that is taking place across the country right now is completely out of line, and if you support this, if you feel this is the path to justice, then you are a completely delusional, brain-dead piece of scum that should keep their fucking mouth shut when it comes to matters such as this. Burning down a Target solves nothing. Burning down an AutoZone solves nothing. Burning down police precincts solves nothing. Gunning down police officers who may be on your side solves nothing. Stealing from stores solves nothing. Running police over solves nothing. Contrary to popular belief, breaking windows does not bring about justice. Civilians who have died during these senseless riots solves nothing. Setting fire to police cars solves nothing. Defunding the police? Defunding the police? Some people actually want to disarm police officers as well. If some of these new proposed policies and demands actually make their way into practice, you are going to be seeing a massive spike in crime and deaths of both civilians and law enforcement. And that includes, but is not limited to, black lives. You know, at this point, I actually want police to resign and withdraw from communities. People hate the police so much? Fine, let's give them what they want. No more law enforcement. Let's live in a country of complete anarchy and lawlessness. Let everyone run rampant with no restrictions, and let's see how that works out. If that were a reality, you would see the same people who are currently advocating for violence, the ones who are saying fuck cops, kill cops, those same pathetic cowardly sheep would be hiding in a corner on their hands and knees begging for a police officer to come and save them. The people who preach about all these foolish things are nothing more than pathetic fucking cowards. All this hate for police officers needs to stop. They are not the bad guys. They are the ones protecting your pathetic ass and your community every day. People just highlight these isolated incidents, and that's exactly what they are, isolated incidents. There is no trend, and plenty of incidents where a cop kills someone is justified. We are not seeing a trend of black men being unjustifiably killed by cops in America. That is simply not true. But hey, that doesn't matter to some people. They will burn these cities to the ground regardless, because everyone is acting on emotion with complete disregard for logic and facts. I know not everyone who supports Black Lives Matter support the chaos and crime that has ensued from these riots, but many do support it and essentially fund it by donating to bail funds for protesters who have been arrested, which doesn't just apply to peaceful protesters, but also the many thieves and anarchists and those who are committing acts of domestic terrorism. You even have tons of celebrities donating to these funds and putting these criminals back out on the streets so they can burn down more targets. And then you got your inbreds who will say they disapprove of the violence and crime, but they downplay just how bad the effects of all this are. They defend the riots and chaos by saying, oh, people are angry and frustrated, so I understand why they are acting out as they are. They claim to be so heartbroken from what happened to George Floyd, but all the lives lost during these riots isn't being treated as a horrible tragedy. Again, David Dorn, ex-police captain, shot dead trying to stop criminals from looting a pawn shop. This was tragic, and yet we saw very limited, if any, coverage at all on this by various media outlets. So much of this sadness being expressed for George Floyd is fake. Certain individuals and the media have ulterior motives. For the media, a lot of this is just about Trump. They'll do whatever it takes to lower Trump's chances of winning the 2020 election. For people on social media, it's either a lack of understanding about what's really going on, or it's just virtue signaling bullshit. Everyone is not as upset as they may pretend to be on the death of George Floyd, a criminal, a man who held a gun to a pregnant lady and robbed her. So much of this is an act. So much of this is manipulation. I've never even cried at a funeral I've been to. I attend the funeral, look at the body for a little bit, and then leave, and life goes on. Not that there's anything wrong with crying at a funeral, but you get my point. You have the Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Frey, sobbing over the death of Floyd. Yeah, I'm sure that was real genuine. People are pretending to be so broken over this incident. Others fake the sympathy for likes on social media. Some fall victim to the peer pressure and feel that they have to be sad just like everyone else, and many are brainwashed mob mentality followers who aren't capable of evaluating a situation and forming their own opinion. so they look to the mob for instructions as to how they should act in a particular situation. Another thing I would like to touch on real quick is how certain individuals and the media alike will attempt to pin all the theft, arson, murder, assault, and other criminal acts during these riots on other various groups that have infiltrated the Black Lives Matter protests. This is partially true. A lot of this destruction is a result of Antifa and other opportunists. I've also heard people saying white people and white supremacists are to blame. But let's be real with ourselves for a moment. A lot of this chaos is also being caused by members of the Black Lives Matter movement. A lot of black people are participating in these criminal acts as well. There is obviously also a ton of white people involved, but I'm just so sick of hearing that it's just Antifa. It's just white people who are responsible for the chaos, despite there being so much footage clearly showing black people breaking in and robbing stores as well as beating white people senseless. But yet I have not heard the media acknowledge the participation of black people in these criminal acts. Not saying it's just black people and it's just Black Lives Matter supporters to blame for the chaos, but they are clearly a part of it, and yet not many people are mentioning it. So again, who's really the racist ones here? It's completely acceptable to pin the blame on white people and call someone a white supremacist without any substantiating evidence, but God forbid you say something along the lines of, most of the vandalism and theft we are seeing as a result of these senseless riots is being caused by African Americans. Nah, no way in hell you're allowed to say that without being labeled a racist. Remarks like that will get your ass canceled. The blatant amount of hypocrisy is disgusting. But hey, white people don't have to deal with racism, right? White people are privileged. Black people have to fear for their life during a traffic stop or when they are just simply walking down the street. Nah, this white privilege isn't real, and you shouldn't fear these things if you're not a fucking criminal. Again, racist people do exist, and you may have had an encounter with racist people, but they are the minority, and people of all races deal with racism, and yes, that includes white people. You know, in some areas, if I were to put on a MAGA hat and walk around town, I'd have to fear for my life for wearing a fucking hat. Think about that for a second. It don't even matter how you feel about Trump. It's just a hat. You want to talk about injustices? Well, how about that? Being harmed because of a hat on your head. But I'm white, so I'm protected by my privilege, right? Wrong. White privilege is a myth. The system does not afford special privileges for being white. Y'all need to wake the fuck up. Now, the last thing I would like to touch on is all the footage of these riots that we've been seeing circulating around the internet this past week. I've noticed that some people are so selective with what footage they choose to acknowledge and share on social media. There is plenty of video evidence showing police officers being attacked and brutalized. There is so much footage of this. And before you unintelligent inbreds say, good, they deserve it. No, they don't. Those officers didn't do anything wrong. They are just doing their jobs. At the end of the day, they are human too, and they have families to return home to. And those cops are most likely anti-racist, just like those who are attacking them. It doesn't make any logical sense. And people are so quick to share videos online that appear to show police officers using excessive force on peaceful protesters, or excessive force on anyone. But they refuse to share and recognize the videos of rioters attacking innocent people and running over police officers, show the lady being beat by a 2x4, show the man getting beat senseless for defending his store. I don't care that the man had a sword, he didn't harm anyone, he was just using it as a deterrent. Show the other white man getting beat by a group of thugs, which by the way is not a racist term, despite what some people claim. A person of any race can be a thug. Show the videos of cops getting ran over. Show the mob dragging those Chicago police officers on the ground. Show David Dorn bleeding out on the pavement. Show all the stores being destroyed and picked clean. Show that officer getting smacked over the head with a brick. Show all that, you fucking pussies. But you won't, because it doesn't fit the narrative. Y'all fear the truth. Now, something else to note about these videos that show what appears to be officers using excessive force on civilians is that those videos don't show the whole story. We don't know what had transpired before that person hit record on their smartphone. Those people may have gotten what they deserved. The force the police officers used may have been warranted. In some cases, I'm sure you'll find a cop who did handle the situation poorly. But either way, that doesn't justify these riots, that doesn't justify these crimes, that doesn't justify the hatred and violence aimed at law enforcement. And next time you share a video and claim that a police officer attacked a peaceful protester, just keep in mind, they are not a peaceful protester if they are defying curfew. They are not a peaceful protester if they are intentionally denying police officers access to an area. They are not a peaceful protester if they are blocking roads and highways, preventing fire trucks from getting into the city so they can do their job. And also, if there is a sea of violent people who are attacking police officers and there are a few peaceful protesters amongst that group, then it's completely understandable if some of those peaceful protesters get tear gas, pepper sprayed, shot with rubber bullets, or whatever, because they are in the line of fire. Not saying it's a good thing when that happens, but let's not act like the cops were intentionally trying to harm a peaceful protester in a scenario like that. Shit happens, that's life, but don't go instigating the violence and then cry when you get it. Like those videos of cop cars pushing through protesters. People try to make the cops out to be in the wrong in those situations. Well, if those cops need to respond to a call and literally have people walking out on the street intentionally blocking those cop cars, preventing them from getting through, then don't fucking cry when the vehicle slowly pushes through. Those cops gave those people ample time to move, but more people chose to walk out in the street and purposely use themselves as a barrier to stop the cops from getting by. Yeah, those people were completely in the wrong there, and if you can't see that, then you are blind. And by the way, those are not peaceful protesters when they are purposely blocking police officers from advancing. I'm so sick and tired of seeing people blame the cops for a lot of these incidents that have occurred over this past week. I've seen so many people share videos of officers handling a person in a way that they feel is out of line, but the events within some of these clips are just completely accidental. Everyone is so fucking quick to assume that the officers involved had some kind of malicious intent to harm an individual when it's obvious it was accidental. Like, let's talk about the clip of the elderly white man who stumbled back, fell on the ground, and smacked his head on the pavement. The officers got so much flack for that, but let's be real, it was nothing more than a freak accident. Those officers were not acting out of line. If anything, it was the elderly man who was in the wrong. So in the video, you see the cops moving forward and yelling, "Get back." The man fails to listen to those orders and actually advances towards the cops. The elderly man walked right up to the officers and was in close proximity to them. He begins to extend his arm towards the officers. His arm is very close to one of the officers' utility belts, where obviously they keep their gun. So then the officers give the elderly man a gentle shove. They didn't appear to be using any kind of extreme force at all. In fact, the officers appeared to have barely even touched the man. There was nothing forceful about it. Then after the officers delivered a gentle shove, which was completely warranted considering the old man approached the cops who were yelling, "Get back," and then he extends his hand out at the officers, which you should never do. If anything, that's what was out of line. After that, the man stumbled backwards, fell on the ground, hit his head, and began bleeding. Some people claim none of the officers helped the man after he had fallen, but that is bullshit. A EMT helped the man shortly after the incident occurred. Apparently in the original police report, cops claim the man lost his balance and fell, which, let's be honest, is kind of what happened. If those officers had delivered that same type of push to 100 other individuals, nothing would have happened. This was just a completely freak accident, which is clear to most people with a brain, but the mob doesn't want to see it like that. The mob stays blind to reality, and they make everything out to be a situation where the cops deliberately attacked a civilian, and that's not what truly happened here. Well, those are my thoughts on the unfortunate events that are currently taking place in America. A lot of this violence isn't even about George Floyd anymore. For some, it never was. This was just an opportunity to go steal a brand new 4K TV. If you support this chaos, then you're a piece of shit who hates their country. Get the fuck out. To those of you doing all your virtue signaling, trying to show everyone how good of a person you are on social media, keep at it. You're really fighting the good fight. You're really changing the world. I saw the Black Lives Matter tweet that the official Halo Twitter put out the other day, and in it they said, "True change will require continued persistent focus until Black lives are truly treated as equal." Like, what the fuck does that even mean? We all have equal rights. Are they talking about completely abolishing racism? Because if that's the case, it'll never happen. You're always gonna have racist individuals. And honestly, who the fuck cares? Stop being so sensitive. Fuck what people think and fuck what people say. Like, imagine actually being offended by a word or a hat or a statue. That is fucking pathetic. This is gonna do it for this video. I could continue to go on and on about this, but I gotta end it here. Before I go, I want you all to know that I'm very well aware this is an unpopular take on the situation. I know this video is going to get disliked by many. I understand this will hurt both my channel and my image, but I kind of don't care. My thoughts are coming from a place of logic and reasoning where I used facts and data to back them up. I am not a racist. I condemn police brutality, but this movement is made up of so much hypocrisy and lies. I know others feel the same way I do, but are hesitant to speak up because they might upset the mob. Well, you know what? Fuck the mob. Fuck your cancel culture bullshit. This is most likely going to be my first and last video I make on this matter. Moving forward, we will be getting back to the Halo content that I genuinely want to make. I probably won't be replying to comments on this video because I'll be arguing with people for weeks. So if you feel like talking shit, just assume I replied telling you to go fuck yourself. I just wanted to make this vid to get my thoughts out there, and now that I've done that, I can rest. Thanks for watching.